Hello everyone, my name is Evan Berman. I am a composer and sound designer for video games, and this is going to be a detailed walkthrough of the WWISE project for a video game that I just finished working on this year called Shadow Burglar. This video is going to serve as a technical showcase of the things that I personally am able to do with the software, seeing as how almost the entirety of this WWISE project was built by myself, as well as a part 2 for anyone who saw the other video on my channel, which introduces WWISE to the uninitiated using this WWISE project, and figured it would be a good or interesting idea to come and see what can the software do that's a little bit more advanced. So, just a brief recap of what WWISE is. WWISE is a middleware integration software that is really good for allowing audio editors and sound designers and composers working in video games to have more flexibility and utility with the tools that they have, because editing audio directly in Engine without custom tools is quite difficult and quite restricting. So this is a tool that allows audio editors and sound designers and audio integrators and composers much more freedom and creative control over what they want a game to sound like and how good they can make the end product. So, jumping right in, there are two states of the game. The two states of the game being exploration and chase. It is a spy game, so we have this kind of noir aesthetic going on, and as a result, we are using this this jazz small trio kind of music in order to score the game. So we have this nice mellow jazz music playing in the background. I'll pull up the Soundcaster and we'll be able to listen to that. So if we are in exploration, this is the music that you will hear. This is the music for the second level in the WWISE project and the first level in the game, just due to some technical reasons. So, you'll see we have a double bass, piano, some strings in the background, and a saxophone soloist. And that's, with some exceptions, basically all that there is. There's one track that has drums, there's one track that has a little bit more expressive vibraphones and a little bit more expressive strings, but that's basically the gist of all the music that is in the game. How does this music work, and how does it dynamically react to the game? Because this music system is surprisingly robust and also really large. There are over 900 individual audio tracks in this project, and you will see why. So if we were to take level 2's music, for example, here we have divided every single segment of the track into its, or every single segment of this track is divided by chord. So the first segment is 12 measures of B flat minor, then 4 measures of F, then 8 measures of D, then that all repeats, then some D minor, some E minor, some D minor, and etc., etc. Each one of these is divided by chord for a reason that we will get into a little bit later. And then within each of these, you have bass, piano, auxiliary accompaniment like strings, maybe some snaps, maybe some spooky trills, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 takes of soloist, 3 of clarinet, and 4 of saxophone for this track in particular. And what the idea for this game was, is that every time you listen to the track, the saxophone solo would be different. and every time you completed a chorus of the music, the saxophone solo would change. So how do we go about doing that? I will show you. So here, in the first track of the song, we have our bass piano, auxiliary accompaniment, 7 soloists, and then a random container track called Decide Soloist. And Decide Soloist, all it does is at the start of the music, at the start of this music segment, which happens whenever you reach the top of the form of the piece, it will randomly select one of these tracks to play. And then it will, based on which one it randomly selects, it will trigger an event. Or it'll trigger like an event that switches a state. And the states in question, I will actually open up another Project Explorer just because it is kind of easier to see that way. View Project Explorer. One. So here we have a state for every single saxophone and every single clarinet. And so every chorus of saxophone, so we had our saxophone and clarinet soloists record a bunch of different takes of a single chorus of solo that all kind of approximately had the same melodic contour or the same vibe or the same idea. And then we assigned each of those to a state. And every time this segment is passed, it randomly picks one of these tracks, sets the state to saxophone 4 or saxophone 2 or clarinet 3. And then based on how we have these buses set up, because these correspond also to buses, it will mute every track that is not the one that has been selected will be muted. So here in the music bus, if we look at soloists, for example, we go to states, we'll see that when clarinet 1 is the music bus that is, or that when clarinet 1 is the state that is selected, every other music bus that is not clarinet 1 gets muted by 108. Or another way of, a more easy way of understanding this is saying that when the state is clarinet 1, you can hear this at full volume, and when it is any other state, it is muted. And when this is clarinet 2, you can hear it at full volume, and when it is any other state, it is muted. And so now, you can see that this is highlighted over here. When we played the music the last time, it passed through this track, and I guess it chose saxophone 4. And so saxophone 4 is the one that is highlighted. So this is the one that you will be hearing until the track loops again and then picks another random container. These are randomly selected, by the way, but they're randomly selected in a sequential order, which means that you can't repeat the same one twice. And so even though these are in random order, you'll have to go through all of them before you hear one of these saxophone solos again for the second time. So that is the gist of how this music system works just as an isolated track. Each of these instruments is routed to a different bus. So saxophone 1 is routed to saxophone 1, saxophone 2 is routed to sax 2. The bass piano and auxiliary accompaniment also have their own buses so that we have a little bit more control over their volume and their sound when it comes to mixing. And then depending on which state is picked by the segment at the beginning of the song, it will randomly choose a soloist to unmute, say, and then mute the rest. And so how that manifests is that you will only ever hear one solo at a time, even though all of them are technically playing at the same time, all at once, starting in the same place. Now, I mentioned before that the music reacts dynamically to whether or not you are currently being chased or being explored. And so how that works is that over here in the spotted music, you'll see that these two pieces of music look almost identical. And that's because they are identical. They have the same form, they have the same structure. They're effectively the same piece of music with a slight change in accompaniment. We decided that the audio signal that a person is being chased is they'll hear a nice big band stinger, and then the accompaniment, the jazz accompaniment, will change from a 2-feel to a walking bass feel, and then the piano accompaniment will get a little bit faster and a little bit more energetic. And so how this works is, here in the music switch container, you have the chase state of the game set to the spotted music. You have the exploration state of the game set to explore music. And when the map loads, the state of the game is automatically set to explore, and whenever you are spotted, like we said with the dialogue systems for the guard barks, over here, player has been spotted, you set the state of the game to chase. And so how does this sound in context? It sounds like this. You start with exploration. Here you could see that the track has automatically and randomly chosen saxophone number 2. And let's say you get spotted. This is what will happen. You click spotted.
Stop right there.
And so you hear a nice big band stinger. And so what happens now if you want to abandon the search? You run away.
I lost her.
And you hear a nice vibraphone sound and string sound with a little bit of cymbal swell that brings you back to the exploration music. And then you get spotted again.
Stop right there, you criminal scum.
And there you go. Now, you'll notice that those stingers were tonal, right? For those of you not familiar with music theory, jazz is a very tonal kind of music. Very frequently, you will change between chords of different qualities and different types, and move through key centers in a way that electronic music, especially modern electronic music, isn't really accustomed to. And it makes for transitioning between two pieces fairly difficult, especially if you're going to be using tonal stingers, which is what we're doing here. We're emulating that big wow big band sound. And so in order to do that, we had to make different big band stingers for every chord. So there is going back to the music editor, there is a different stinger for every chord in the game. So let's say, for example, let's go, where's version 3? That's what I want. So here, that is our D minor stinger, which will play over any D minor chord, and it's structured. I structured these in a way so that regardless of whether or not they were being played on a downbeat, or a downbeat that's a strong beat, or a downbeat that's a weak beat. So in music, a downbeat would be a 1 or a 3, and then a weak beat would be a 2 or 4. But jazz is very centered on hitting things on the 2 and on the 4. And so it has to sound good regardless of whether or not it hits on the offbeats or the downbeats. And so we have it so that the stinger will transition from exploration to spotted on the next beat. And you can do that with the music transition system, and it will play this on whatever beat it lands on. So it's structured so that it works with any beat that's in the piece. And it will go over every chord. So here we have the E minor 7 flat 5, the E minor, so they're all similar, but they all have the same structure. They're all similar, so that the player is still able to understand that, like, oh no, I've been spotted. Wow. But now it won't clash with any of the harmonic content that is going on underneath the piece of music. And the way that we were able to pull these transitions off is with the transitions capabilities of WWISE, where here, every time you transition from any one of these segments to the spotted music, forgive me if this gets a little technical, I'll try and explain it as slowly as I can. Anytime you transition from one of these music segments in exploration to the spotted playlist container that contains all the music segments, it will transition from the same playlist item. So it'll transition to a specific playlist item, which is the same, the analogous one in the spotted music, to the same time as the playing segment. So what does that mean in normal person English speak? It means that here, if we have we're in the first 12 measures that's in B flat minor, this piece of music and this piece of music are analogous counterparts. It means that in context of us making these two pieces of music that are the same, they are the same piece of music, just with different accompaniment. So you can almost imagine that both of these are playing at the same time, and when you reach beat 4 of this, you reach beat 4 of this. That they exist in parallel to each other. And so we're specifying here in this transition menu that every time you transition from exploration to spotted, so every time that you've been caught and you're on this B minor music segment and you go to the spotted playlist container, you will jump to the specific playlist item that is its analogous counterpart, which you have to set manually. And it'll jump to the same time as the playing segment. So if you jump at beat 7 and your thing is if you jump at the first beat of measure 7 and your thing is 12 measures long, then it will jump to the first beat of measure 7 of the analogous segment that is 12 measures long. And then, of course, there's some fade-ins and fade-outs that we added in using the fade-in, fade-out. And here we have the use transition segment play pre and post entry. You'll also see that these transition segments, this is even more technical, forgive me, but you'll see that each of these transition segments has a length of exactly 0 beats. Here's your exit cue and your entrance cue. And so they function very similar to stingers in WWISE. Stingers, by the way, is another way that we could have accomplished this by making custom stingers and then not segmenting all the tracks. We found that gave us a little bit less control over how we wanted everything to sound, so we did it this way. Even though this way was more time inefficient, unfortunately that is kind of how things go in game audio. Oftentimes you'll end up trading control for efficiency, and this is finding that balancing act is very difficult. So for this game, we decided we wanted a little bit more control, and we had the luxury of the time to be able to do that and to do the custom routing for 900 audio tracks, because there wasn't that much else going on in the game audio-wise. And so we decided that that was a trade-off that was worth having, and I think it works very well. Lastly, so this was the music system by and large. Nothing too crazy to talk about. The only other thing that is worth mentioning is that when you're transitioning from, say, exploration to spotted, you might be wondering, there are multiple pieces of... These are two separate pieces of music, and each one of them has their Decide Soloist track, which will randomly pick a different saxophone or clarinet sound to mute or to unmute and to play. So, say for example, if these were playing in parallel, this track would, say, randomly pick clarinet 3, and this track would randomly pick like saxophone 2. How do you avoid that from happening? Or if, for example, this played and then this didn't trigger, so exploration played and then spotted didn't trigger, how would you, like, what would that sound like? Would it just transition to spotted and the saxophone solo would just disappear? No, it wouldn't. And the reason for that is because in each individual segment, all the saxophone and clarinet solos that are playing within the individual segments are all the same and routed in the same way. So there is one chorus of saxophone that is called, over the exploration music, called saxophone 2, right? So this would be take 2. And that exact same piece of audio is also in the spotted music here, saxophone take 2. And they are exactly the same, and they're routed in exactly the same way. And so when you switch from exploration to spotted, it doesn't really matter which one of these states has been randomly called by the software, which one of these clarinet 1 through 3, saxophone 1 through 4 states has been called from the software. Once the state is set, all the other buses are muted, and because these have the same saxophone solos playing at the same time, what happens is they essentially crossfade into each other, and you don't hear a difference. You can't really notice it. So going back to, just to demonstrate, if you start from, let's say we'll start from Chase. So here we're in saxophone 3.
I lost her.
And here, we're still in saxophone 3. And so nothing's changed because we're crossfading into the same solo with the same amount of space. And it also kind of helps that the instructions for the saxophone player were to play this very modally, with and kind of noodly, long stretches of chords, not a whole lot of chord changes, very ambient sounding melodies, not something that would draw too much attention to itself. So even in the event of some small imperfections here and there, you don't really notice them in the grand scheme of the game. That is it. There are a couple of other things like attenuation and 3D spatialization that are, while interesting, not super technical, and so I won't get into them. If this interests anybody, if you want to learn more about WWISE and what it can do, Audiokinetic offers some very, very excellent introductory and study material on their website. You can even become certified in WWISE as an official user of their software on their website. And I highly recommend that you go and check that out if this interests you at all. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed. I hope this was informative. Play the game if you think it sounds like fun. It is a very short playthrough. I think you can make it from beginning to end in about 20 minutes. And that is all for me. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.